The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Mustafa Al-Kadhimi, Prime Minister of the Republic of Iraq. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Mustafa Al-Kadhimi, Prime Minister of the Republic of Iraq. I invite him to address the Assembly.
In the name of God, most gracious and merciful, Mr. President of the United Nations General Assembly, Excellencies, may peace be upon you. It is my pleasure to greet you on behalf of Iraq, a founding member state of the organization that hosts us today. I congratulate Mr. Shaba Qureshi on his election as President of the 77th session of the UN General Assembly, confident of his expertise and competence in achieving the desired objectives of the session. I extend my sincere thanks to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, for his vital role in leading this body over the past years and in supporting and assisting the government of Iraq. We will ever be grateful and appreciative of his efforts. Mr. President, Iraq is a country deeply rooted in history and human memory. It represents a living example of how hope prevails over significant challenges that may seem impossible, especially at the level of domestic political conflict. However, the spirit of hope embodied by the people of Iraq is able to snatch opportunities for life, progress, and peace from the clutches of conflict and crises. Mr. President, despite the difficult circumstances, Iraqis employed that spirit of hope to fight terrorism and ultimately defeat it on behalf of the entire world. That task was arduous. Our people made enormous sacrifices, not only to liberate their land from the terrorist gangs of ISIS, but also to prevent them from threatening people everywhere. We succeeded in uprooting its destructive ideology. Here I would like to commemorate and pay tribute to the martyrs of Iraq, who sacrificed their lives in defense of the values of freedom, justice, democracy, and human rights. During that just war, our Iraqi military forces acquired unique skills in fighting ISIS, enforcing the rule of law, and peacekeeping. Iraq benefited from the expertise of our allies in the fight against terrorism, and we are thankful and appreciative to them. We renew Iraq's call for sustaining the effort to confront the problem of international terrorism and those groups that back it. Iraq looks forward to receiving further United Nations support in reconstructing the areas liberated and affected by the occupation of ISIS terrorists. Furthermore, the potential United Nations aid to respond to the urgent and necessary humanitarian needs has to enhance Iraq's capabilities and efforts to rebuild the destroyed infrastructure in a way that would help our cities and their people, including IDPs, to return to normal life again. It is worth noting that Iraq's ministries and governmental institutions have continued their efforts to help repatriate Iraqi families in Al-Hol camp in Syria and reintegrate them into their hometowns. I want to point out to you here that we have developed a comprehensive governmental program for the reconstruction of those liberated areas, the rehabilitation of infrastructure, and the safe and voluntary return of displaced people. We would like to express our profound thanks and appreciation to donor countries and international organizations for their humanitarian support and assistance. Mr. President, as I address you from this platform, I reiterate Iraq's calls for its territories not to be used under the pretext of combating terrorism or protecting the national security of other countries in a manner that endangers our security and stability. Iraq stresses the need to respect the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter and the rules of international law and international relations, the respect for the sovereignty of states, the principles of good neighborliness, and the strengthening of cooperative ties. The government of Iraq affirms its adherence to an approach that calls for resolving crises and differences through diplomatic channels. Mr. President, there is no doubt that Iraq, like the rest of the world, has been affected by the pandemic wave of COVID-19. The pandemic has impacted all aspects of life and has proven that international cooperation and solidarity were the most successful way to confront such a pandemic. The Iraqi government and its national institutions have taken many preventive and curative measures necessary to curtail and limit this pandemic and to provide treatment for the infected. Let me take this opportunity to express our deep appreciation to those countries, international organizations, the World Health Organization, and other humanitarian organizations for their sincere efforts in addressing the pandemic and assisting developing countries in confronting it and combating it. Mr. President, realizing the importance of national commitments, the protection of democratic processes, and the people's demands to democratically exercise their rights and freedom of expression, the Iraqi government has endeavored to establish free and fair elections with the support of the Security Council, the United Nations, and other international organizations which have praised its integrity and professionalism. I want to extend my thanks and appreciation to everyone who helped support those elections. I want specifically to express my appreciation to those who have helped in these most successful of elections, and Mr. Sistani particularly for supporting the electoral process. Despite the success of those elections, the political forces could not agree on the government's formation, leading to a political impasse. My government has called for a serious and transparent dialogue between all political forces and parties to discuss ways out of the current political crisis in an effort by the government to meet the people's aspirations and hopes and achieve their goals to secure our people's future. The government of Iraq is working to build the state, to maintain its stature on the basis of coexistence among all the Iraqi people, all the while respecting diversity and ideological, religious, and sectarian pluralism under the rule of the values and principles of justice and equality. This is done through ensuring freedom of expression, the right to peaceful demonstration, and human rights, strengthening law enforcement agencies and accountability, ending violations against individuals, working to achieve a state monopoly on arms, preventing the possession and use of arms outside of the law and state institutions, investigating their use against citizens and members of the security forces, and holding the perpetrators accountable according to the law and applying justice, equal justice to all. Mr. President, Iraq is keen to be a source of stability, regionally and internationally. Iraq seeks to bring together different viewpoints and endeavors to find sustainable, peaceful solutions to regional crises, and mend ties between the region's countries by introducing a number of initiatives to ensure peace and security in our region, a region that has long suffered from wars and crises. The time has come to rebuild the region pursuant to that balanced policy. Baghdad has hosted many meetings for the region's countries. It is a consequence of the balanced policy pursued by this government and an approach for Iraqi diplomacy with neighboring countries, which serves the interests of all parties as well as the interests of the peoples of the region, building on historical relations and encouraging regional cooperation as well as diffusing crises. The Baghdad Conference on Partnership and Cooperation in August of last year witnessed a remarkable level of participation by the neighboring brotherly and friendly countries. The conference resulted in a number of important recommendations presented in the communique of the Baghdad Summit. Mr. President, it is no secret to anyone that Iraq is going through difficult climate conditions due to the scarcity of water resources, the change of rivers' courses that Iraq shares with neighboring countries, and the building of projects without taking into account their effects on water quotas, and the fair use by riparian countries. All of those conditions have combined and have led Iraq to become the fifth most vulnerable country to climate change. This has recently led to the drying up of most of the areas of the Iraqi marshes. It has caused damage to the livelihoods of hundreds of families living there. The marshes are natural reserves. They are part of the World Heritage List. These conditions have led to an increase in the rate of desertification and internal displacement. The loss of livelihoods of many families also led to a drop in the proportion of agricultural land. Iraq calls upon all the region's countries to enter into a dialogue to resolve these water issues in accordance with international laws and treaties. Iraq is an oil-producing country that has participated in the progress and development of the global economy since the beginning of the last century. As Iraq suffers from climate change, it will also suffer from all the measures taken to address this phenomenon and the reduction in dependence on fossil fuels. Nevertheless, this government has worked on important strategic projects in clean energy, associated gas extraction, and other areas related to the green economy. This requires international support in various fields in order to back Iraq's efforts and enable us to move forward in implementing national policies and strategies to mitigate and adapt to the adverse effects of climate change. Similarly, we have not neglected the necessity of developing the education and culture sectors. At the head of our priorities, we put the implementation of the National Strategy for Public and Higher Education 2030, which includes 100% school enrollment rate, upgrading the standards of public and higher education, developing educational techniques and technologies, and enhancing skills and competencies in accordance to the job market and economic development. We have also launched the National Initiative for Early Childhood Development, a policy that covers a period of 10 years, aimed at reducing the illiteracy rate in our society and provides an appropriate educational environment for our children, especially since many segments of our society suffer from the repercussions of wars, conflicts, and corruption, which have hit the foundations of the educational sector. We have embarked on a campaign to build hundreds of schools in various governorates after they suffered from a significant shortage during the past decades, in addition to facilitating the task of building universities and colleges in the country. Mr. President, allow me to assert Iraq's firm stance on the Palestinian cause and the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people. We stress the need to preserve the historical status of Jerusalem and its holy sites. While we affirm our commitment to Syria's territorial integrity and security, we support the holding of political talks between all Syrian parties, and we support the efforts of the Special Envoy of the Secretary General of the United Nations in accordance with relevant Security Council resolutions. Like other countries of the world, Iraq believes that regional crises and wars do have consequences for every country in the world. We also believe that ordinary people always pay the price for such wars. Wars impact all aspects of life, particularly energy supplies, food, and security. Accordingly, we stress the need to find peaceful and sustainable solutions to regional and international crises through dialogue. We call for avoiding the use of force. We call for the maintenance of international peace and security. The global economy and humanity must be saved from the repercussions of such wars. In conclusion, the challenges facing my country, Iraq, today are but the result of decades-long accumulation of political crises and conflicts. We are working to dismantle them, placing our hope mostly on our young society's aspiration to defend democracy, being a way of life and means for good governance. Our nascent democracy still has a spirit of courage and hope. It needs the understanding and support of the international community so that we can continue building the modern state, reconstruction, the provision of services, and the building of infrastructure destroyed by wars. We believe in the necessity of investing in our people and working on sustainable development in cooperation and comprehensive partnership with our regional neighbors and the international community. Thank you very much, and may God's peace and mercy and blessings be upon you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of the Republic of Iraq for the statement just made. The Assembly will hear